Cyberpunk 2077 launch disaster continues.
And things have kind of only gotten worse for CD Projekt Red because just last night, Sony has announced that they have delisted Cyberpunk 2077.
But even since then, we've heard responses and a similar approach from both Best Buy and Microsoft. And even CD Projekt Red has
unprecedented, I feel like this is unprecedented move of removing the game completely from the PlayStation Store.
Wow. Sometimes you just can never expect certain outcomes, and this is one of them. I'm Casey, and I hope you'll join me as I get some new Chrome, jack in, and take on Night City. Okay, so Party Rock Anthem by LMFAO. Green Lantern starring Ryan Reynolds, everyone's favorite movie. The death of Osama bin Laden. And the start of developing Cyberpunk 2077. What do all these seemingly random things have in common? They all happened in 2011. That's right. I mean, now that Cyberpunk 2077 is here, it doesn't really feel like we had to wait all that long. But sure enough, the game was in development for damn near 9 years before finally seeing its release in December of 2020, or this year if you're watching this within the first week or two of the video's upload. CD Projekt Red on many occasions just straight up said the game would be ready whenever it was ready, allowing for hype to slowly build over the years. The mystique of Cyberpunk would continuously grow along with the excitement. To be fair too, CD Projekt Red's vision of the game is pretty astounding and extremely massive in scope, so massive that they would constantly try adding new features and technology for the game. CD Projekt Red is no stranger to pushing the bounds of what a video game can do, as many have witnessed with the wild success of their Witcher franchise. Taking just the RPG aspect from The Witcher, they set on to show everyone a futuristic world unlike anything anyone has ever seen up until this point. While the cyberpunk aesthetic has definitely grown in popularity over the years, I still don't think any piece of media, maybe excluding Blade Runner films, of course, has captured the style better. I mean, seeing delay after delay, CD Projekt Red refused to release the game any sooner than when it was perfect to do so. So with all the painstaking detail, sweat, and time, Cyberpunk 2077 was shaping up to be a landmark historic launch. But at last, it's here, and it must be perfect, right? Right? When Cyberpunk 2077 finally released on December 9th, 2020, it was met with pretty favorable opinion on PC. Consoles were a completely different story, and we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes, but for now let's talk about the PC version, which also happens to be the version of the game that I played, and that's where all the footage you're seeing is from unless otherwise stated. As Cyberpunk 2077 geared up for launch, people started noticing the first signs of what later would be revealed to be major issues with the game. You see, CD Projekt Red placed a review embargo on the game lasting up until December 7th at 9 PM Pacific Time, mere hours before Cyberpunk's official release, making it virtually impossible for many outlets to not only play the game in time, but produce a video or written review for the game as well. All of this while CD Projekt Red had another stipulation. Reviewers could only show pre-decided footage approved by CD Projekt Red, ensuring that nothing outside of what the developers had in mind could be shown. But no, we're not done there. On top of everything else, CD Projekt Red also failed to send out console review codes or copies to any major outlets, once again proving to control their own narrative. Of course, all of this would just be confusing oddities if there wasn't any real issues with the game in the first place. I mean, just a week before launch, CEO Adam Kaczynski stated in an investor's call that Cyberpunk 2077 ran surprisingly well on base models PS4 and Xbox Ones. But if you've been on the internet at all lately, you know that that isn't exactly true, and that's not exactly how it went. It didn't take long at all after the game was in the hands of consumers before pictures started popping up online, videos started getting shared, and word of mouth traveled at the speed of the internet. The truth was inevitable. Cyberpunk 2077 was a colossal bug factory at best on PC, and a downright scam at worst on consoles. On PC, my platform of choice, I'd say I had an okay time in terms of bugs and glitches. I mean, don't get me wrong, they were plentiful. As pretty much any shot you see during this review, if you look close enough, chances are you'll see some visual bugs somewhere on the screen. Now, I played this on some older hardware, so I kind of expected to run into some issues. For those of you that care, I'm running this game on a GTX 1070, 24 gigs of RAM, and an Intel Core i7-3770K clocked at 3.5 GHz. For Cyberpunk 2077 in particular, I didn't find overclocking helped all that much, if at all, so I decided against it in the end. Anyway, I digress. Cyberpunk is in a pretty rough state here, even on the PC side of things. I know it seems like open world games usually have more bugs than your average game, especially at launch, but this is on a whole different level. We're talking about a whole smorgasbord of technical and visual bugs here. A smorgasbord! Do you know how bad it has to be for me to use that word? I sound absolutely ridiculous. This game has it all. Broken animations, non-existent lip syncing, crazy level of detail pop in, on a level I didn't even know was possible for a game. I'm talking, I can't talk to NPCs to turn in my quest because the game says I can't. Kind of issues. We're talking full stop hangups in gameplay. We're looking at Nintendo 64 looking pedestrians. They've got quicksand roads, getting stuck on geometry while simultaneously getting launched down the stairs like Kevin McAllister was visiting. Boom! Would you look at that? This is the Christmas special after all. No, I'm not done yet. That's just the PC side of things. On consoles in particular, the base models of the PS4 and Xbox One, it gets downright comically bad. Folks, we're talking sub 720p resolution at lower than 15 frames per second. That is just downright disgusting. CD Projekt Red pretty much admitted to purposely hiding how these versions of the game performed. Backlash on this was pretty severe, as many others covered this way better than I could. So I'll just touch briefly on a couple of the big ones. CD Projekt Red's stock value fell nearly 30%. They had to hold an emergency investors meeting to answer for what was going on. They released a sort of apology stating that they should have paid more attention to the base model games while developing Cyberpunk. And finally, Sony, just as the time of writing this, in an unprecedented move, pulled Cyberpunk 2077 from their digital storefront and began issuing refunds en masse to anyone who purchased the game from them. What's baffling to me is CD Projekt Red admitting to needing to pay more attention to the base model platforms. This game began development back in 2011. That was almost 2 years before the PS4 and Xbox One even launched, meaning that the base model PS4 and Xbox One would have had to have been the game's target platform. It makes no sense to me, and I'm not sure if it ever will. But at the time of this review, things around this game are still rapidly evolving and changing. Who knows what will happen? Well, I guess future me, but still. Anyway, that was a lot to unpack, and I was hesitant to even include any of the controversies surrounding this game. I thought maybe I should just keep it focused on how the game looks and plays on my platform of choice. But that didn't sit well with me, as it's pretty obvious that not everyone is getting the same experience here, or even close to the same experience in the cases of the base last-gen consoles. So there it is. To the best of my ability, that is the shit show known as the Cyberpunk 2077 launch. Now, with all that being said, and out of the way, we'll move on to the game itself, and likely the reason you clicked on this video in the first place. In Cyberpunk 2077, you play as V, a merc in the fictional Night City, where everyone seems to be out to get everyone. Everything is commercialized to the furthest extreme possible, and everyone is obsessed with looking good and body modification. As you play, you'll take on quests from dozens of unique suppliers that can lead to some pretty crazy events. Take them all on, and earn some cool, powerful new gear, guns, melee weapons, and body modifications. At the start of the game, you can customize your own V to your liking, though the editor is a little bit more limited than I was led to believe. Regardless, the options given are still more than enough to create someone awesome, and you can even customize your character's genitals, so there's that. Something I wish I would have known before my first playthrough though, is that once you create your character, that's it. Besides clothing, they are locked in stone. Currently, you can't change your hair, nails, hell, even your makeup. So make sure you are really happy with your character before pressing confirm, because there's no takesy-backsies in the game right now. Hopefully that's something they'll change pretty quickly down the road, because it just seems a little bizarre to me to build such a rich, detailed, and stylized world, such as Cyberpunk, and yet you restrict the player to conforming to one look the whole game, while actively promoting the complete opposite in-game. Just seems like a really odd decision, or just another sign pointing to rushing this game across the finish line. But when things come together in Cyberpunk 2077, they do so in awe. Oftentimes I found myself stunned from the vista. Hell, anytime I wanted a visual treat, I would just slowly play the game, almost as if I was a presenter of it. You know those dramatic camera movements or smooth turns that you see from gameplay of upcoming games? Yeah, I totally do that. In fact, you might have noticed it already. I was recording a lot of this footage with Shadowplay. Not all of it, because Cyberpunk doesn't seem to like it very much, so I didn't even know I was recording half of the time. I just hit record and played how I normally would have. So instinctually, I just wanted to play slowly. Slowly look around, or walk down the street, or drive at a reasonable speed. Not always, but I did like to do it quite a lot. I don't know if any of you felt inclined to do the same, or if maybe I'm just a bit odd. Lighting is top tier in this game, and spoiler alert, this is without RTX. Yeah, the new tech almost specifically designed for this game, and this is without it. What can I say? I'm a glutton for punishment. No, but for real, you can't sit there and tell me that this doesn't look, like, really good. Like, even without RTX on. I don't know what wizardry they pulled, but it's appreciated. The light often looks particularly good on NPCs, as yet another new piece of tech is brought to the table with advanced light scattering for human skin. The graphics of this game brings many rigs to their knees. Like I said, I'm using a 1070 and I was able to play at roughly 2K resolution and max settings at around 30 frames per second or so. Now keep in mind this is without RTX, as my GPU doesn't even support that option. I could have gotten to around 60 frames per second if I wanted to, but I would have had to turn down the resolution to about 1080p, and I just thought that for me and the experience I was looking for, I'd rather have higher quality visuals and a lower frame rate. I know a lot of people feel that frame rate is the most important, and that is completely fine, and I look forward to reading about that in the comments down below. But yeah, with that being said, Cyberpunk just looks great when it wants to. It doesn't always want to. In fact, sometimes it can feel like it's quite insistent on the opposite. But if you keep with it, just holy crap, it can blow your mind sometimes. Like, even out in the Badlands, and I gotta stop. We should move on, but you get the point. It's a pretty game. When I first loaded up Cyberpunk 2077, I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. I knew that it was both a shooter and an RPG game, genres in which I usually love. Separately, but often I find can get muddied pretty quickly when trying to bring them together. At least in my opinion, not a whole lot of games can pull it off really all that well. Typically the games that do succeed usually just do one thing extremely well, while sort of neglecting the other. Like the Mass Effect trilogy. Yeah, that's right, trilogy. I absolutely love Mass Effect, yet let's be real here. We don't really stick around for the gunplay in those games, do we? Or at least I don't. I mean, the gunplay isn't bad, but it's not exactly anything groundbreaking. No, we stick around for the characters, the stories, the worlds, and the experiences. So, going back to Cyberpunk 2077, I didn't know which it would be. Would it be a shooter first and an RPG second, something more akin to Destiny, or would it be more like a Mass Effect? Well, I was beyond floored and excited to find that it is equally both. I mean, it is like a perfect split down the middle. It really is quite an accomplishment here. I mean, you have the stuff from your shooters, right? The guns and the melee weapons and looking down sight and different types of ammo and stuff. Like, that's all there, and surprisingly enough, it feels really good too. The gunplay feels really nice. Once you get the hang of it, I'd say it feels sort of like Call of Duty, but the enemies take damage more like from Destiny 2 or something like that. But what's great is, like I said, it doesn't stop there. The RPG side of the scale is almost all there too. I mean, it goes on, in depth, from not 1, not 2, or even 3 or 4, but like 5 different skill trees that you can invest your points into. The amount of different ways you could spec your character in this game is probably close to unlimited. Personally, though, I found that I like putting most of my points into athletics and my technology. It really comes in handy many times throughout the story and game, especially the technology one, at least for me, but that's something else right there. Even from the get-go, you're not guaranteed to have the same experience in the story as others. You can choose one of 3 different life paths to start the game from. Nomad, which sees you out in the Badlands right from the beginning, Street Kid, a merc that knows the true underside of Night City, and lastly, Corpo, a high-ranking corporate employee, breaking bad and getting even, starting from the top down. For my playthroughs, I chose both Corpo and Street Kid. Nothing against Mad Max or anything, but Night City is just way cooler to me than the Badlands. But speaking of Night City, I mean, holy crap, if you ask me, Night City is the main character of this game. If nothing else, CD Projekt Red created one of the most realistic, immersive, and utterly ambitious cities ever put into a video game. It is simply jaw-dropping at times. While not the largest city ever seen in a game, it most definitely is the most packed. Every last tiny little corner, nook and cranny is jam-packed with detail and setting dressing. Every area of Night City feels different, whether you're in the corpo-dominated territory sprawling with towering monoliths, or you're walking down Japantown, or maybe looking for a little company on Jig Jig Street. Every area of the city feels unique and equally detailed as the next. I don't know how many times I've been distracted or pulled away while on a mission just to go look at something that caught my eye. But it almost always feels worth it, as gear and loot is hidden all across throughout Night City. So give me the most detailed and packed open city I've ever seen, filled to the brim with secrets and loot? Yeah, I'm going to be diving pretty damn deep in. Honestly, Night City is what makes Cyberpunk 2077 shine, even with all of its flaws. I'd say the only thing about Night City that kind of ruins the illusion it's trying so hard to cast is the residents that inhabit the city. I mean, I'll just say it, they're pretty damn bad. Like, possibly some of the worst AI that I've seen in a game lately. You really can't interact with them in any meaningful way, and it's really disappointing considering how realistic the whole thing feels. You'll see pedestrians phase in and out of his existence or walk through each other. If you happen to fire a weapon around them, typically they all just crouch in place, like forever. That's it. They won't ever move again until you leave and come back. There's also an arbitrary talk command prompt that pops up anytime you look at a pedestrian, and honestly I think that's just there to rub salt into the wound, as it virtually does nothing except cue a line of usually terrible or overly aggressive dialogue from the NPC. That's it, like no extra dialogue options or witty interactions, nothing. At least not with the regular NPCs in the game. There's plenty of more advanced NPCs that you can interact with, which can usually lead to more quests and new side jobs throughout Night City. But as awesome as Night City is, there's definitely something helping it keep its level of immersion, and that is the sound design in Cyberpunk 2077, or rather just the soundtrack in general. Of course, you got your big hitters, from the powerful bass-crushing title song to the smooth, quiet jazz on the radio. It all adds to the atmosphere of the game. It really does all add up to a believable world, when it wants to. And that's just the sad truth of the moment that this game is currently in. Almost every positive has a negative attached. Almost everything great has something terrible, just the other direction. This is a game that I personally enjoyed, and I'm still enjoying a lot. It's just so frustrating to see that not everyone could have at least a decent experience with it. CD Projekt Red had huge ambitions with Cyberpunk 2077, probably way too big of ambitions if we're being honest here. No one but the devs themselves really know what happened behind the scenes for all these years, or what really happened that led us to this moment where one of the most trusted names in gaming was caught lying about their game. It's a damn shame, because beneath all of these issues, bugs, technical problems, lying, scamming, embargo placing, and just downright scummy tactics, there is a good game here. Not just a good game, but possibly even a really great game. but I have to rate and review the game that was given, even with all the disastrous issues plaguing the base model last-gen consoles. So my final score for my experience on Cyberpunk 2077 for PC is a 6 out of 10. Hopefully CD Projekt Red takes all of its plentiful criticism to heart, and they bust their asses trying to get this game up to snuff. The roadmap ahead seems a little bit vague, but only time will tell, I suppose. Oh, and if CD Projekt Red does get everything working as intended and all is well, you can assume my final score for Cyberpunk 2077 is a 9 out of 10. But that's only if they get this thing patched up and working right. This is a great game here, guys. It's just really hard to see right now. But I hope you enjoyed my review for Cyberpunk 2077. This review took way longer than I initially thought that it would to make, but I am honestly quite happy with how it turned out, and I hope that you liked it too. If you haven't already, I hope that you would maybe consider subscribing. And please be sure to click that thumbs up button if you enjoyed the video. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Is anyone there?